This Memorial Day, we gather to remember those that have gone before us, that have fought and died for us to keep Americans safe and prosperous on a path to have life and liberty. It's a great experiment that started a couple, 300 years ago, and I just wanted today to reflect on some things I was finding relative to the D-Day and how D-Day kind of reflects and connects with the future and the even now. So let's, if you'll just journey with me for a few minutes, we'll maybe see some things that I'd never seen before. Maybe you'll find that they're interesting, and it'll give us a new outlook for how to further appreciate the freedoms that we've been given by those who have sacrificed. So let's take a walk. One of the freedoms that we've been afforded living in the United States, thanks to those who have defended it along the way, is the right to participate in helping and connecting with our fellow brothers and sisters, and being a part of ability for prosperity, for life and liberty right here on American soil. Just to give you a little bit of an intro of my background, I wanted to be a mechanical engineer all my life. God gave me that capability to start that process, and along the way I had some time with the space program, working with the Space Shuttle system. It's a great opportunity. I think it's a dream of many people, many Americans, to be a part of reaching for the stars. In my small way, I was able to connect with that dream for a while, and after the Challenger exploded, I got to switch from the petrochem industry over to NASA to be a subcontractor. And my boss said, okay, we're all developers in this company, but we have a contract to collect all the failure modes and effects analysis for the whole Space Shuttle system into one centralized database. Computers were a new thing back then. One centralized database so that managers can make more informed decisions for flight safety for the crew and for the vehicle. He says, since you're the mechanical engineer, we'd like you to be the point lead for collecting all those engineering documents from all 18 subcontractors that have built the Space Shuttle. One time I was sitting at my desk and trying to figure out just how big this task was, and I realized that if it were all on paper, which it wasn't, that was the challenge. It was on every mom and pop kind of computer that had been invented by that time. It would have been an 18-foot stack of paper of these 10,000 or so engineers that had smoked over all the ways that every part could fail. So flash forward to today, because I wanted to tell you about, hey, this was going to be the past meets the future and the present kind of talk about our freedoms and Memorial Day and such. I heard about that there was going to be a rocket launch from South Texas, and it seemed like it was going to be a bigger deal than than just space tourism, as had been talked about for the last 10 years. So I went, my wife and I, we went down there with some students and saw that it was, this was going to be an industrialization of space. This was not sending billionaires up into space for joyrides. It was going to be a heavy lifting, twice the size of the Saturn rocket that took us to the moon back when I was 10 years old. Twice the size. And I looked around the landscape and I said, something's not quite normal here. We're only 6 miles away from the nearest city, and I knew from the Cape Canaveral layout that where the moon launch was launched was that as the crow flies, the Apollo missions were launching 9 miles from the nearest small city. And so I started a quest of seeing how, if anyone was asking the right questions. I mean, it's hard to know what questions to ask when you're talking about rocket science. As an average person, we don't know. That's why we have professionals, to go do that. Well, I had a peek under the hood as what professionals do and think relative to failure modes and effects analysis for launching rockets. And it didn't seem like the same scrutiny was being applied to the launch of this rocket down in Boca Chica near South Padre Island. Well, so my journey took me to trying to go into AI, and AI says, hey, it's going to be 172 decibels at the shock wave at 5 miles out, which is going to cause brain damage and loss of hearing, maybe temporary, but loss of hearing and possible organ damage. And that was, AI is dangerous, so at least that's what the leader of SpaceX has said. AI is dangerous. Well, so I was trying to quantify, without having to have a $5 million budget and a spare Starship to go blow up with a super heavy booster, which could be done at the Nevada test site where the United States tested above ground nuclear weapons back in the 50 years ago or so. So I looked for some other types of explosions that would lend credible data about harm to humans. I know there were at this time in this project, there was just a lot of focus on this spaceship is being launched right next to a Parks and Wildlife conservatory, reservatory, whatever you want to call it. It's clear that to everyone that this was killing the idea and the concept of preserving a safe habitat for animals when you're having those amounts of high sound blasting through the countryside. How do birds know how to sing anymore if they can't hear themselves sing after having their hearing blown away? So I thought, well, my grandfather told me that he felt the ground of his garage shake as he was on top of his garage in Houston during the Texas City explosion back in 1947. So I looked and well, it's about 50 miles away. I started thinking, well, is there a way to find out the details of who and how much people were affected by that explosion? So I read some articles. I found a PhD historian that had written an article. I asked him about how I could find out more about the medical details from the explosion. He said, well, you should check the newspapers, go through the archives. Well, he said it's going to probably be on microfiche, the photocopies of the newspapers, because newspapers are not going to be, they're going to be history by now. And I searched, and I really didn't find much of anything. And then I landed on a report in an archive where they had photocopied the after the explosion, the people at the time, the government ordered several agencies to do inspections, analysis of how this happened and how to prevent it from happening in the future. So this report that I landed on was from the Bureau of Mines, something like that. I'll probably put it in the link below. You can check it out yourself. It's if you feel like you're walking down the streets of Texas City Port post-explosion, and you're feeling through the testimonies that they received firsthand, you're getting an idea of just how massive it was to have shaken a building 50 miles away. So so the report, I'll just read you a couple of things from. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I can't read the report at the same time as I'm filming. Didn't realize that. Not a professional YouTuber. So the report said that after the explosion in 1947 in April, a ship by the name of Grand Camp had exploded. Just to back up, to give you a little bit of the details of the explosion, it was there was a fire, and longshoremen were seeing smoke coming from the hold number 4 of the Grand Camp, and it had an unusual color to it. The report went on to say that different longshoremen weren't aware of exactly what was in the ship. Not everyone was clued in. So the smoke was a mystery, why it was a certain color and then it changed color. Then a guy went and looked in the hold, and he figured out, well, it's a little bit more than he should probably stick around for. So he left and walked over to a good distance from the ship, and then the hatches exploded off the ship. Not sure of the timing. It's just a couple minutes or a few minutes later that I think that there were something like 550 to 600 by this time volunteer firemen that were fighting the fire. Maybe that number included some of the longshoremen and whatever. So Grand Camp went up, it just disintegrated. The cargo had ammonium nitrate. The purpose of this report was to investigate what was it that exploded and what tipped it off, what caused the explosion. You know, I mean, because you got to know these things if you're working with shipping stuff. And the report chronicled that there were airplanes in the air, a couple airplanes in the air by now that were watching the commotion. One of the airplanes, the shock wave folded its wings directly up, and the fuselage dropped all the way to the ground. Another airplane, this was from a observer of a pilot from a nearby airport. He would observe that happening in the distance, and another airplane, he said, just disappeared out of the air from the blast. A piece of drill stem tubing that was 2,700 pounds, 6 inches in diameter, flew 1,000, no, it was 13. I'll put it in the link below. It was like a couple of miles. And they found it embedded in the ground 6 feet. I remember as a young engineer when I was co-oping at one of the chemical plants there in Texas City, that there's a 5-ton anchor on the Texas City dike that's there as a memorial to the Texas City explosion. That anchor had come off the ship and blown all the way over to the dike. So you can get on Google Maps and see how far that is, but it's a 5-ton anchor. They found it like 10 feet embedded in the ground. They dug it out, and now it's a memorial. So the blast instantly killed like 600 people. The report, just to give the gravity of what was going on with the U.S. government response, it said that a few hours later, President Truman was giving the order to all hands on deck. Every U.S. government agency should provide anything they can to the rescue and for the survivors. The report also points out that in the same sentence that Dwight D. Eisenhower, the chief of staff to Truman at the time, was involved in the same get all hands on deck to help the people in Texas. So why ammonium nitrate? We hear ammonium nitrate in the news, like with the Lebanon port explosion, with the explosion in the city of West in Texas. Pretty major explosions. So my quest was to find out, well, what was the level of harm to people at different perimeters from the explosion. Admittedly, the people right there, they just disintegrated. The 600 firefighters and longshoremen. 1,000 other people were said to be harmed. There were lawsuits that were mentioned that ended up being picked up and settled by the U.S. government, by Congress, but I couldn't find any records about the triage of kinds of injury. And I mean, if a report's being done to, how can we help in the future? What can we learn from this? I was just thinking, okay, there should be something. But the Bureau of Mines was only looking at the material that exploded, the ammonium nitrate, and they said they were getting samples of what came off the ship. There were some bags that didn't explode that they were able to use as samples, and they went back to the source where the ammonium nitrate was coming from. It was coming from a former military supplier of bomb making material out of Nebraska. Like I said, you can read it in the report. The curiosity to me was, this was just less than 2 years after the end of World War II, and you have ammonium nitrate, which was munitions grade, being shipped to, I mean, why was it being shipped through Texas City Port? That's a really small port. It's mostly petrochem. I already knew that kind of from just my days living in Texas City. And the report said that the ammonium nitrate, they had been a supplier to the military, and that it now was being shipped to France to help French farmers grow crops. So I guess after the war, in the reconstruction phase, the generals got together and they probably said, okay, how can we help with our resources? How can we help Europe get back on their feet? So, I don't know, my wheels were kind of turning. One of the first persons to kind of like call for all hands on deck was Eisenhower. He had been the commanding general for the Allied forces at DDay. Over all the Allied forces, they had put him on as the commander. So stop there. I didn't learn how to know at 5 miles out from a 1 kiloton explosion were people going to lose their hearing, like I had thought I'd learned maybe from AI. But you can't trust AI, right? So if you put in the same search in AI today, you get a totally different answer. And I just wonder, why is it now answer me like, oh, well, if you have a 1 kiloton explosion, then you're probably dealing with something like SpaceX, and where they take care of everything. And I'm going, I wasn't even didn't mention SpaceX. I'd cleared all the registers. So Eisenhower probably had Grand Camp. He already knew what that word was. And how do I know that? Well, let me switch over to a little bit of other history that I found recently. That it's just like, whoa, it connects D-Day to the Texas City explosion like hand in glove. When the Allies were going to get across the channel, they trained for a couple of years of how they were going to storm the beaches. They were going to take out the cliff, the guns on the cliff. The Texas Rangers were training how to scale the cliff. Rudder, I think, he's a famous former Texas A&M president. He was a commander of those Rangers. The reason Rudder Tower at Texas A&M is built to 110 feet tall is because Rudder wanted to remember. We talked about this as a Remembrance Day. He wanted to remember his men having to climb a 110-foot cliff with machine gun spraying down on them in order to accomplish the job of taking out the guns, the cannons that would be pelting the soldiers that were doing beach fall, to give them another chance to be able to successfully move the Allied armies across the channel and on their path to defeating the Nazis, the Germans, Hitler. So So I was doing a search on another random, like D-Day's coming up. I wanted to know about this folklore of why Rudder built it 110 feet tall, and so I'm researching the Texas Rangers and their project to scale the cliffs to take out the guns. And I see in the wiki that, I'm probably getting ahead of myself, but I see in the wiki that it's only been recently, like in the last 10 years, known that the commanders knew that there were no guns operational at the top of that 110 feet. If you watch the Longest Day movie, a lot of famous actors, it's a long movie, but it's insightful with D-Day commemoration coming up. Watch it, because it's trying to, as best as possible, knit together what happened on D-Day with coming onto the beaches and climbing those cliffs. There's a scene in there where the guys get to the top of the cliff and they go, the bombardment pillboxes that are made out of concrete, they're empty. There's no guns. There's no artillery there. They found artillery someplace off-site, and they went and decommissioned those things so that they wouldn't fire if they were ever able to be moved over to be in harm's way. So I thought, okay, just remember that little data point. It's kind of like significant on D-Day, because that's only new news of about 2010. I think you can find it in the wiki that the commander, the top level commanders, knew that there were no guns, and so these Texas Rangers were scaling through machine gun fire. And it really becomes poignant when you watch the movie, because they do enact that. And guys are falling off halfway up the cliff, falling off because they've been shot by the machine guns. But as I was reading through and seeing the movie, it said that the whole deal of D-Day was to capture and land on these beaches so that they could start down a small road from Grand Camp to this other little city inland in France. Grand Camp. Where have I seen that? This week, when I was researching the Texas City disaster. It was just kind of like a light turned on. The same general that was receiving the news and telling everyone in America, all hands on deck, go help the poor Texans from this disaster, was the same commander that was making those tough decisions about whether to scale that cliff or not. There's some ideas that I haven't, the PhDs in history, I'm sure they've researched this already, but it's probably the enigma, the idea that we had just broken the code of the Germans using the special AI kind of device. Oh, AI is showing up again in this talk. Okay, the beginnings of AI devices was the enigma, and it was able to break the code of the Germans. Just learned this new. It's probably more known than this report that I'm talking about about the Texas City disaster, but so the enigma, the generals, they're making these tough decisions. When they were practicing for the D-Day landings, they would do it on the southern shores of UK. and they asked for all the villagers and the farmers to leave their homes, I guess for a couple of years, and they had a secret activity on those south shores because it was a very similar topography to the same beaches at Normandy. And so the military was practicing beach landings on the south of England to get everything ready for D-Day. Well, some ships were sunk by the Germans, and the story I heard was they had to let them be sunk, because if they had intercepted the submarine, the Germans would have known that we had broken the code, because that's the only reason we knew that the submarines were there, was because we had broken the code with the Enigma AI tool. AI at that time. 600 American soldiers were on those ships. So the biggest price at the beginning of D-Day was Americans helping to liberate Europe for a good cause. It's totally good cause. Nazism it had to be eliminated. So, I mean, Monday morning quarterback, Monday morning generaling. Was that the right decision to not warn the boats, the landing boats of the oncoming submarine? Maybe the Texas Rangers scaling the hill, that was enough of a spoof. But what I learned out of this that connects with the here and now is not only it's a memory tool. Yeah, hard decisions were made, lives were truly lost, and it was just heartbreaking, the lives that were lost on D-Day, all throughout the liberation of the world from a totalitarian dictatorship of the Nazis. But the thing I learned about today that connects with today is that the safety thing, getting back to the launching of the large rocket from Boca Chica in South Texas. Are decisions being made with the right motives? I can understand making the decision it was a hard call, maybe, and if there's no other way to not let the Germans know that we had broken the code, it's a lot of lives have been lost. Poor Eisenhower, it was right on his desk, those lost lives. And it's probably right on his desk, the lost lives of the Rangers, the Texas Rangers, going up. I think Eisenhower's born in Texas, Sherman, Texas. That's something I remember. But making decisions that are for a hard call like that, was it the report from the Mines group? It said that Texas City Port was not prepared to have the rigor of shipping all kinds of cargo through that port. There were other ports that were prepared to be able to have the rigor to I mean, you had longshoremen running around apparently in this report saying, why is that smoke blue? Why is it turning this color? Why is it turning orange? You had firefighters not knowing what they were dealing with when their lives were all snuffed, when it turned out to be a munitions grade many, many, many tons of ammonium nitrate. There was a greater good to help farmers get on their feet again in France. Grand Camp. Now you see the Grand Camp ship that blew up in Texas City Port was the same name of the beachhead town where Eisenhower had his plan on his map that they had to take Grand Camp and move inland in order to on a major step to winning the war. But just like 600 lives were lost off the shore of the UK in the beach, storming the beach trainings, there were 600 lives lost in Texas 2 years later of the firefighters who didn't know what they didn't know exactly what they were dealing with. And the longshoremen didn't know what they were dealing with. So fast forward to today, I'll put it in the link, but the Army Corps of Engineers did the permitting for SpaceX to be able to launch from Boca Chica. They looked at all aspects, environment, safety to humans, ecology. So they did another round of permitting for the second launch tower a few weeks ago, and they requested for people to give inputs. So I wrote up the inputs. You can see my inputs. My inputs are from that perspective of, hey, I've seen the rigor that NASA did for Challenger, for Space Shuttle, and it was 18 feet of documents of how things could fail. And these were engineers that had no non-disclosure agreements. They could talk to newspapers about it because NASA was public. But the Army Corps of Engineers was tasked to give their opinion of should they permit the building of this next launch tower. And I sent all my questions in. You can see if they're fair-minded questions. I got zero response, and I could find zero response to the public after they took in all those comments. Is the military really able to make an even-handed decision about and should whatever decisions being made for public safety in America on American soil, should they be hidden from the public? The decision process and the making of those safety analysis. Before the first flight of the Super Heavy with the Starship, I found out that the FAA was part of the permitting process. I didn't know that the Corps of Engineers had been a part of it till just recently. But okay, so I wrote the FAA point of contact, and I showed her all the stuff that had been published for relative to sound pressure levels. I mean, that's all I could find. I could only find one report of when the Starship takes off, it's going to have this amount of noise. And these people are going to be affected in this city and that city and the ones downwind, downrange. So I wrote her and I said, has there been a failure modes and effects analysis done on a launch pad explosion? I mean, yeah, it's going to explode, maybe. Even Elon has said many, many times, for progress, we have to have explosions. That's what we learned from. And in one news outlet where he's before reporters. He said, some reporter asked him, well, what about a launch pad explosion? He says, well, I hope it doesn't fail on the launch pad, because it will burn up my launch tower. When you have 1,000 tons of liquid methane and liquid oxygen, it doesn't just burn. There are many scenarios where it explodes. It could spill out and leak out over the countryside, and downwind could go for a couple miles, and it could be like blowing up right next to South Padre Island. But 6 miles out, it's still an issue. With the Grand Camp, there was a piece of drill stem that flew a couple, 3 miles. 2,700 pound, very compact piece of drill stem. So yeah, so just as we do this Memorial Day and we consider all that's been accomplished to protect and defend on foreign soil, to keep America safe and free and prosperous, and to consider each person as an individual, as a participant in life and constitutional access to life and liberty, we should have all hands on deck, making sure there's transparency in what's going to happen when we have an industrialization of space happening 6 miles away from one of our cities. It's not just that it's an important city because it's a tourist location. There's lots of money going through there because everyone goes there to recoup from their jobs. It's because there are lives. There's people there. It's not just a question of being two-faced about having a conservatory for animals, and we're burning them up and we're blowing out their ears. And what kind of PSTD or whatever are we doing to I mean, I remember as a teenager, Yellowstone National Park, someone drove a dune buggy into the park, into the forest, and they were so serious about that being the noise of a dune buggy and the wheels churning up the soil, that they not only gave the guy a fine, but they airlifted the dune buggy out with helicopter so that it wouldn't destroy any more. And then they charged him for the airlift of his dune buggy with a U.S. Army helicopter. I mean, that guy, he had to be wishing he had never had that. But now we're letting a rocket company benefit. At one point in one of these news conferences, Elon said, yeah, in the dream of dreams, there would be 30-mile circumference, 30-mile diameter around a launch pad, so to deal with the noise issues. Okay, they're achieving 6 miles on one side because that land between them and there, it's a game conservatory that he didn't have to go buy and pay for. So he's not 15 miles away from South Padre. He's 6 miles away. And if he says that it'd be the dream of dreams to have 30 miles, so 15 miles distance from the nearest ear, well, then the other side, it's very it's a great find, because if Mexico doesn't care, he's right on the Mexican border, so he's getting his other 15 miles of freedom without having to pay for anything. So you know, it's sometimes safety comes down to economics. The economic model that is being used for Boca Chica, the launches, is that keep it cheap, because I don't have the money to do all that I need to do to get to space. If he were to really buy a 30-mile diameter circle on the coast of a desolate part of Texas, which there are places like that that are not like right next door to a tourist town, it would cost to pay for half, because half of it's on the ocean, right? So to pay for half of that 30-mile circle, it's going to be $4 or $5 billion. I think that's all he's spent on his whole development of his space program, is that amount of money. So the economics of not having to spend $5 billion to get a place to launch is letting him launch. But the laws, the Texas laws that let him launch without indemnity to loss of life if his rockets fail, they were built on a non-commercial model. They were built on a semi-commercial model of, okay, taking billionaires up for joyrides on small rockets. Well, Elon was building Starlink and Space Shuttle and Space Starship designs as soon as that law was penned, 12 years ago. So, and this is industrialization of space. So it's not just about safety. There's also economy that's connected to safety. How much are you willing to pay to keep people safe? Well, our legislature in Texas has decided that it's much more important to let one company or one man put people in harm's way so he can get to space, industrialize. Maybe there's tax base that's going to come out of that. But in the meantime, it's a grand camp. It's helping it solve a problem, but putting other people in harm's way. The report said that after that, Texas City Port decided to never, ever let anything other than petrochem through their port. That's the lessons learned from 1947, 1948. Are we learning any lessons today about transparency? Is the military, with their secrecy, is the FAA with their secrecy, not letting the public know what's happening right next door, is that serving all Americans equally constitutionally? On this day, we remember the people who have given their lives for all the ideals of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Are we any further down the road of understanding how to make that roll out to everyone equally? I've done a little bit of thinking about what that would look like. In the NASA days, it had to be NASA, it had to be the government money to be able to have the money to be able to get to space. SpaceX doesn't have the money to get to space because they're using free money by launching by a Parks and Wildlife Conservatory. That's the reason there's no high rises there right now. But there's a high rise. There is a launch pad there, only because there's no high rises. Are we giving back to safety and security issues of America? We're built on a capitalistic model. If we give one person the free ride to get to space first and put up a global internet system that's way ahead of everyone else, it's a monopoly. That is the thing that will kill capitalism. Monopolies kill capitalism. And there's nothing being done or talked about that once he has 14,000 satellites up there, I AI'd, searched the value of the world internet provider system is $1.4 trillion a year. And if you have Starlink being successful to reach everyone on the planet, you not only have everyone that's existing that's being served by internet, you now have the rest of the people that are beyond the last mile of internet being able to come online. So that 1.4 trillion is going to be even bigger. And it's a no-brainer to have internet when you don't have to put up towers everywhere. You just have satellites. With 14,000 satellites that can be put up with the Starship, because it's able to take up so much bigger payload. We are going to have security issues monetarily, because now there's no competition. We'll have security issues because now we have one company that's able to tell us, we're turning you off. You can't have access. The whole beauty of the internet design today was that no one can turn off the internet, because it is so well interconnected that if you turn off one pipe, the other ones keep pumping. Then there's the issue of is one company doing what's best for the economy or the whatever of the world? Because we almost have clean space now than what can be after we have 14,000 satellites up there. We can go out. We used to be able to go out to West Texas and look up and go, all those lights up there, they're not moving, except an occasional meteorite. Now we see moving meteorites that don't burn up all night, every night, and it's startling. And that's only with 5,000 satellites out of the 14,000. Then there's issues of NASA saying about space trash. There's no plan for how to decommission. There's not all the 5,000 satellites are working anymore, but there's no plan about how to get them back down. Then you end up with, are we even going to be able to go to the moon 10 years from now? When there's a bunch of pieces of things in the way. What if a rogue country wants to decommission the 14,000? And they could easily do that. And now you have satellites that don't work, that are now clouding the ability to launch anything to go to the moon ever again. Because if you hit a piece of space trash going 20,000 miles an hour, it blows you up. you can't go through those meteor showers, human-made meteor showers. So there needs to be a path forward that's not just about thinking, well, yeah, go for it. It's all about the American dream. He's going to be able to get first to space and make. So they deserve the money. It's the investment of $4 billion to get up to space with his rockets so far, and to start deploying the satellites, compared to the take-home pay of $1.4 trillion every year. That's not just business. That's bank robbery. You don't put in a $4 billion investment and get, 1,000-fold return, or whatever that is. I wanted to think, and I'll just kind of close this out, because it's we see a lot in America about equality for people. Back when Texas was being inhabited, plots of land were being given, 640 acres. If you could keep it up, that you got that 1 square mile. There were a lot of people that have been rich for many, many, many generations because their plot happened to have oil under it. When you drill down, those people got oil, and they got rights to access to that monetarily. And we as a nation have allowed that and protected that until this day, hundreds of years. When you drill up, you don't just get oil, you get gold. And so my first thought is, when they wrote the 2012 Texas Legislature Space Tourism Act, when they left out the idea that space would be industrialized through their protecting the launches, giving them tax breaks and giving them breaks from hurting people, not causing them, not saying that they're being held accountable for the rocket falling on people. That law is not doing justice to the Constitution, to giving people, the American people, the people of Texas, a fair, equally served share in the natural resources of the country. I would suggest do like Norway did. Put in a trust where 80%, 90%, give a fair, big chunk of change for profit to the ones going to space and harvesting new internet technology and so forth. But hey, the resource, they couldn't have gotten there if it wasn't Texans. They could go to Georgia. Georgia the people have voted against their politicians, and there's no more spaceport. There's no opportunity for SpaceX to launch from there. Texans should be the ones that came to Texas. There's people that came to Texas when they couldn't get free land, when they were slaves. And today we have an opportunity to have the resources apportioned to equally across all Texans that happen to be and live here and call this home, for the resources of space access to be distributed equally to all Texans. If you took 80%, 90% of the 1.4 trillion payload, and you spread it out to all 30 million Texans, that's a couple of $1,000s a month for as long as those satellites are pumping, making money. And the rocket company's still making a hefty profit. So I think there's a way, and the Texans could easily buy the 4 billion chunk piece of land a little bit further up the coast where there's 30 miles of disengagement, or 15 miles on each side of the launch pad. That would be only $160 per Texan. I mean, we have Texans going in that can't make ends meet, and they're buying lotto cards. They're buying $160 worth of lotto cards every year, hoping to win the lotto. With this plan, every Texan wins the lotto just from 1 year's worth of $160, and they deserve it. Some other person, one other person, doesn't. It's the Great Texas Giveaway. So on Memorial Day, I think we can learn from the past how to keep things safer in the future. Because once you take the economy and you get the economy dragon locked down, Texans are not going to be doing non-transparent, unsafe things over Texas soil. It's going to be, okay, let's get these different studies from different thinkers out there. Is this too close, too dangerous? There's going to be none of this cards to the chest, and the military's calling shots, and the FAA's calling the secret shots about permitting. I don't know. This has been kind of a long talk, but it has implications from all the way back to DDay to what your grandchildren are going to be thinking about. Because the people in Norway, when they put all the money into a trust from the oil field off the North Sea, instead of going to the government coffers where politicians would squander it, and rather than letting the oil companies take control and bully Norwegians around, every Norwegian today is like $500,000 or $1 million in their pocket. It's under a trust, but the UK didn't do the same thing for their part of the North Sea oil, and all that it flittered away. Norway is the biggest. It is listed as the biggest investor in the world from that trust fund. I think 3% of the world's economy is because of that trust fund from that North Sea oil. That's our North Sea oil. It's our North Sea gold, because it's a lot more valuable than the North Sea oil. Let's take a picture. Let's take a page out of that playbook economically, and I think we'll end up having a safer, brighter, happier America. All right, take care. Happy Memorial Day, and signing out.